We begin today this second debate by wishing all of you the best of health. Perhaps this isn't something we talk about too often, perhaps because there are always emergent matters to discuss, whether it be politics or elections or law and order or global wars. But let's not forget the bigger picture, viewers. Nothing, and I mean nothing, matters as much as our health and the health of our loved ones. And how do we ensure this? To dumb it down, using conventional logic, it's a matter of prevention and cure. And luckily, in these modern times, there are lifestyles, therapies, pharmaceuticals, and procedures for both of these. For instance, if you're not well, maybe if you have fever, you may take a paracetamol, or if you've got a weak stomach, take an antacid. And if there's a raging once-in-a-century pandemic, you may get vaccinated. And when you do so, there is an implicit trust in the formulation being sold over the counter, that the drug regulators are ensuring that they go through years of rigorous testing and scrutiny at several levels before they are allowed to be sold as medicines. But what happens, viewers, if it turns out that these medicines and drugs aren't of sound quality? Think about it. What happens when 53 medicines, many of them well known, are found to be not of standard quality, quote unquote? Because that's exactly what happened. In its random batch testing in August alone, a central drug regulator found over 50 fairly common drugs to be deficient for a range of reasons. So what happens if you were to take one of these pills, or if you were prescribed a course, or if you regularly take one of these innocuously? Viewers, we really don't know what this could do. By deduction, in the best case, it would have no effect, and in the worst, well, let's not talk about the worst, but what's the solution and who's to blame? Let's open this up. Dr. Professor U.S. Vishal Rao, Dean, Center of Academics and Research, Healthcare Global Cancer Center. Dr. S. Chatterjee, Senior Consultant, Internal Medicine, Indraprastha Apollo Hospital, Delhi. Suhail Seth is also joining us. And Dr. Shashank Joshi, needs no introduction, is with us. Gentlemen, good evening. Dr. Joshi, I want to begin by asking you, when you came to know of this, what was your first thought?
Well, I think it's very appalling and shocking. And many of these are called as counterfeit or spurious drugs. And these need to be weeded out from the system completely, because these can have deleterious effects independent of the treatment paradigm they have. And I think, therefore, our regulators are vigilant, but their vigilance needs to be further heightened. And this has to be totally removed from the system completely, because this is something, according to me, is unacceptable.
This is unacceptable. Dr. Chatterjee, what do you make of this? I mean, as we are having this conversation, I'm sure our viewers who are watching this, all households have one of these drugs, paracetamol, antacid, or what have you, in the list, from the list of 50.
Absolutely. I would agree with you that these are very commonly used drugs, used for very common medical problems. And if they are spurious, they can actually harm you and they may not be of any effect. So the person who is consuming these drugs can become more sick, and their illness will not be treated, and they might need admission to a hospital. It can sometimes be fatal. So that's why I would agree with Dr. Shashank that the regulatory authorities need to be very strict. They need to really check all these drugs very strictly. And what we have been told, and that's why we have been always saying that there was quite a few times people used to blame it on the doctors that you're not using generic brands and all that. That's the reason. We always thought that these generic brands need to be really controlled well by the regulatory authorities. We are not against generic brands at all because it's a cheap drug. But the regulatory authorities have to give that confidence in us that all these drugs are of standard quality, which are going to benefit my patient.
Dr. Rao, what are we supposed to do in a situation like this where we are not sure about the quality of the medicines? What should one do?
I think we are waking up to a reality a little bit late, but nonetheless, I think this is a very pertinent issue where we are seeing you take a closer look at this. There is one aspect of the report which says NSQ, not standard quality. And the other aspect which the other pharma have dissociated from, saying that this is not our drug at all. This is a spurious drug. So there are two different aspects here which needs to be understood in depth. Not standard quality told by the CDSCO and the drug manufacturer saying some of these batches are not even ours. Which means, is there another complete black market running out there? And I think this is the time that India should, like we have a national accreditation board for hospitals, also have an accreditation board for pharmacies. It's very, very mandatory that we start thinking in these lines of accreditation and quality control, which I think is the need of the hour for the country today.
Suhail, look what we are discussing. At a time or in the times that we live in, we are now being told that the medicines that you're taking are not of the quality that it should be.
You know, what I'm surprised about is that how pliant and compassionate and kind some of my fellow panelists are. It is an abominable shame. It is a human tragedy. And this is how India keeps getting shamed time after again. I'll tell you what the problem is. The problem is you have a tardy regulator. The drug controller of India should be sacked, if not jailed permanently. What are these jokers there for? What is their business? Their business is to approve the manufacturing of drugs. Does that mean that Pranesh will go in his own backyard and produce paracetamol and sell it? Number one. Number two, you think the racket is not between the pharmacists and the consumer? The pharmacists are also to blame, some of the pharmacies. But the tragedy is we will have this television discussion and we forgotten. You know why? Because the four of us are not affected. Because as one of the doctors rightly said, we buy branded drugs. It is irrelevant whether you buy branded or generic. The person who's buying it is buying it for a cure. He's buying it in faith and he's buying it out of trust. You are denying that individual all three. For that, you should be punished. A. B. Where are the state health ministers? If we have found out that these medicines are being produced in certain states, all our raiding agencies which raid every Tom, Dick and Harry, where the hell are they? Why are they not doing anything? You know, Pranesh, I'm tired in this country. When there's a problem, all of us get all charged up. But there is no goddamn solution. You know why? Because there is a nexus. We are not the Republic of India. We are also the Republic of nexuses. There are some doctors, errant doctors, as there are in any profession, as in marketing, as in everywhere, as in journalism. These doctors are also conniving. And if they are, then they should be hauled up. Where the hell is your Indian Medical Association? Where are all the consumer rights groups? Where are all the hospitals with quality control? Where are all our laboratories? Where is all this? We have everything in place, and yet we let the citizen of this country down. And you know, Pranesh, you're buying a medicine to be healed. You're not buying a medicine to die. For that, you wouldn't need a medicine. Then the government under Prime Minister Modi launches grandiose plans, Ayushman Bharat and all. Hey, Ayushman Bharat, where? If you don't have the proper facilities to test, manufacture, produce and distribute right amount of quality as far as your drugs are concerned, then what kind of Ayushman Bharat are you talking about? It's just lip service, nothing else. I think people should be taken to task. The police in those states where this manufacturing has happened or this has been detected, They should start arresting people. When these guys go to jail, they will realize the dangers that they are to society.
You know, Suhail, you began by saying that 5 of us on the panel are not affected. I'm not sure, because I'm sure we've taken one of the 50 drugs, that have been listed in this audit report, whether it is paracetamol or the others. But the trouble is, Dr. Joshi, that, the thing about nexus is absolutely correct. There is a nexus. We are all aware about it. Can we just, put the blame on the regulator? The regulator must answer. But it's about the general public. Just think about it. Someone comes to you, a patient comes to you with a problem. You prescribe medicines. The medicines which are sold, they are supposed to heal, help him. If that turns out to be a bigger problem, then what are we to do?
Pranesh, I think there are two things. One is that the enforcement of the pharmacy quality control is with the state. And each state's FDA is supposed to be draconian, and this is a non-pardonable thing. So I'm very, very clear that this is a non-pardonable thing. there is no scope for any excesses at all. We are here with a common goal, which is to heal and take care of people living with various diseases. And if we prescribe a particular drug, it is implied that this drug is meeting the standards because it has met the norms of the regulator. Now, the regulator sitting in the center is testing for quality, but it is every state which is the enforcement agency as far as the FDA is concerned. And I think many a times, unfortunately, people go to a chemist and directly take medications without a prescription. So I think this is something which also should be discouraged. I completely agree with you that this is a non-negotiable and non-pardonable entity. And spurious drugs and counterfeit drugs often are found, and these have to be, as you rightfully said, Sohail rightfully said, they have to be rated. This is not a pardonable thing at all. And I think we need to ensure that the good pharmacy practices and quality control is non-negotiable in these entities. And I think we should not let this just as a one-time episode.
Right.
I think we have to have a call for action, and we must ensure that at a local level, we do a little bit. Maybe a QR code. We are in a digital era. So maybe in a QR code so that it's not a counterfeit. We are using it for various other purposes. So something like that, we can have some mechanism to make it, that it is an approved drug from an approved company.
Okay, we've spoken about the problem, Dr. Chatterjee. What can the patients do? What are the dangers involved? What are we looking at?
See, they can be really harmful, and they can actually make you much more sick than what you are already when you're suffering from an illness. So the patients, as Dr. Shashank said, the patients have to go to a doctor. They should get a proper prescription. They should not take drugs on their own. But at the end of the day, when a prescription is written by a doctor, it has to be, obviously, the medicine has to be brought from a pharmaceutical. So the regulatory authorities, unfortunately, everything comes on to the regulatory authority and the government authorities to ensure that the drug quality is, the standards are well maintained. We are pertaining to the standards of all the drugs that are being bought or that are being sold in the society. And unfortunately, the patient here is totally helpless.
Dr. Chatterjee, I understand. I understand the spirit of the argument. All I want to know from you is what can the patients do? I mean, people who are watching this broadcast, our debate, discussion, what should they do? What will you tell them?
See, it is impossible even for us to know whether a drug is spurious or not, even for prescribing doctors. So it's almost impossible for the patient to also even understand whether the drug is spurious or not. So unfortunately, he or she goes to the shop and buys the medication on faith that it will cure him or her. And at the end of the day, it doesn't happen. So it's almost impossible. So they should speak against.
I think Suhail has a point to make. Yes, Suhail.
I have one basic problem with the argument here, logical problem. There are times, Pranesh, when we do not go to the doctors because the doctors are not available and the doctors may not be on call. Suppose something happens at night and I want to take an aspirin or a paracetamol. Am I going to call up my doctor? Half the doctors will not take your calls. The other half will say, oh, for such a small thing, you have woken me up at midnight. So I pop a pill. Should I not be popping that pill in good faith? A, B. Where have I got that pill from? I haven't bought that pill from a grocery store. I bought it from a pharmacy. Shouldn't the pharmacies be regulated? They should. But why should the pharmacies be regulated if the state government does its goddamn job? The problem is most of these states are running rackets, especially with approvals, licensing, and manufacturing conveniences. You tell me, Pranesh, do you think in India, the state governments or the law enforcement agencies within those states do not know that there's a racket going on? Of course they do. But they're all being bribed. So these rascals are willing to sacrifice the lives of citizens rather than take action against their own because there is a nexus.
And Dr. Rao, some of these medicines are really popular. I mean, I'm sure you know the names already and we are flashing some of those on the screen. It's not as if we are talking about some, rare drug.
Absolutely. And I think that's what, like Mr. Sohail said and my other co-panelists, Dr. Chatterjee and Dr. Joshi, I would say there are 4 P's here: a patient, a pharmacist, a pharmacy, and a purchaser. There are 4 P's involved in this. The purchaser is the wholesaler. Now imagine the depth of the rut is that even the purchaser doesn't know if the drug is spurious or not. Now, if it is at that extent, then how will the pharmacy know, or maybe all of them know? There is an all or none phenomenon possibly at both ends here. And at the top of this lies the regulatory. And I think today's issue has come to light because of a random inspection check that has brought NSQ or non-standard quality drugs to light.
Right.
Why can't this be made regularly? Why
Okay.
can't such raids be made regularly by state governments, like Sohail said? Why can't this be made as a mandate by doing not?
No, this happens
by going to different
every month, and which is the problem, Dr. Joshi? This is just one list in 1 month. I mean, what should be done? I don't know.
So we see this, even in clinical care, patient is not responding to fever. This happened to me 2 years back. One of my patients was not responding to fever for antibiotic. And I changed the brand and the medication, and he responded to the same compound. So I did raise a red flag of a spurious drug, and I told the manufacturer. Manufacturer said this was probably a spurious entity coming from beyond the borders. So there has to be a mechanism, and I feel we will have to barcode and ensure that it is tracked to the last mile. Because ultimately, every pill is consumed by a human being, and human lives matter. So I think for that, we need tracking to the last mile.
Right, but
And
you,
then
Dr.
this
Joshi, the
counterpoint-
trouble in this is that while you can call up the manufacturer, there are doctors who don't have access to the manufacturer, and there are patients who don't have access to doctors like Dr. Joshi. So, this is really the crux of the problem. So we're looking at a larger problem, which is why we had this discussion. I hope to have this discussion in the run-up to, our quest to find a solution. I thank all of you for joining us tonight. Let's keep our fingers crossed. Let's hope a solution is found on this sooner than later. The news are on the other side.